Hi, this is Dr. Jose Saldivar with another episode, the Way to College podcast. And, this podcast has been an incredible blessing and opportunity for me. And it's been that because it's allowed me to connect with folks, people I've met throughout my life. And today's guest is another one of those amazing individuals. And before I allow him to introduce himself, I'm going to share a little story. And I don't know that he remembers this, but so so my guest, um, my I met my guest my sophomore year in college. He lived across the hall from my roommate and I, and very incredibly studious gentleman. He and his roommate always studying. It was they were inspiring in their work ethic and everything they did. So, to see where he's at now is amazing. But one thing I remember is Sunday nights, be studying. Every once in a while, he'd have his door open, and there was this he'd be listening to this. It was like a '70s station, and it was like '70s like slow jams, and we'd like have conversations around these slow jams, and I'll never forget those slow jams. And I don't know if they were coming in from LA. He's from the LA area, but it is they were great material for conversation. So I'll leave it at that. And so my guest, I'm going to allow him to introduce himself. So Dr. Vazquez, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm the avid listener of Art Laboe. My name's Jesus Vasquez. I'm a, cardiac electrophysiologist, born and raised in the LA area. Now I'm a member of a pretty large practice. There's about 20 cardiologists in my group, and we currently service the Los Angeles, the Eastern Los Angeles area, kind of the northern aspect for those of you who are familiar with Los Angeles. So we service all the way from along the 210 corridor kind of thing.
So um, how should I refer to you? Should I refer to you as Dr. Vazquez? Should I refer to you as Chewy? What do I?
She's good. She's good.
All right.
I remember
So
when I started practicing, when I was in medical school, I told everyone they could call me Chewy, and people who weren't familiar with this thought it was inappropriate. So I was like, oh no, it's a common nickname. It is nothing to do with anything inappropriate.
or Star Wars, apparently. No.
Or Star Wars, yes, exactly. Yeah.
So Chewy, I ask all my guests if they had to identify the starting point for their educational journey, where would that starting point be for you?
Um, I was thinking about this because I think you had sent me a message saying to be prepared for a similar question. And I'll be honest, I couldn't come up with an answer. I'm sure many of your prior guests have had a quick and easy answer. And first of all, I wanted to thank you for asking me that question because it sent me down memory lane, and I got all teary-eyed and stuff. And it kind of brings back some really good memories. But in my unique experience, I feel like picking the one thing that got me going is kind of like the closest example I could think of is like a river, right? You go to a river, whether it be the Rio Grande or the Colorado, and you go to where it meets the ocean, and you look back and you think you can see where it starts, but you really can't. And the further back you go, the further you have other things lifting up the water and providing it with its abilities. So, I can go all the way back to second grade. I can go all the way back to even before I can remember, visiting those family members who were in college and seeing them and having them be inspiration. So if you're asking me, where I started on my path to be where I am now, I'd have to be honest and say I don't know. If you'd like me to focus more on what got me through different steps, I could probably answer those. Like, for example, what got me actually thinking that someone in my unique background could actually dare to dream and do things, I'd say it was my second grade teacher. She was the one who had patience for a skinny kid with a big head who couldn't sit still in chair. And she, being a little Spanish nun who probably dealt with this her whole life, knew that I needed a little bit more hugs and less screaming because I got plenty of that at home, right? But yeah, it's a hard one. It's a hard one to get to.
You talked about, or you referenced, your unique situation. Why would you say your situation was unique?
Yeah, so I guess all of us struggle in different ways, right? Being the, I don't know if it's considered first generation or second generation American, right? So the generation behind me, my father and my mother's generation, were born in a foreign country, right? They came across on their own, um, and looking different than most of the people in my neighborhood. Although my neighborhood was mostly similar to myself, but turning on the television and seeing people who didn't look like me, people who didn't talk like me, um, fills you with a lot of insecurities that I'm sure people from different cultural backgrounds have, right? And even though we're more similar than we are different, when you're young and you're not as mature in your way of thinking, you focus on those differences and you focus on what you think makes them different from you and what makes them special, and you think that you can never reach that. And so being a Mexican American first generation, on one side of my family, I'm the first one to ever go to college, or second one actually after my sister. On the other side of my family, I'm like the third one to go to college. It's a struggle to surpass a lot of the negativity that gets into your mind that probably shouldn't be there.
You talked about your second grade teacher as being maybe, you use the analogy, I guess, of a river, right? And all of the things along the way, if we look back, and things that uplift. And so this second grade teacher, what was it? What do you remember about what she told you that maybe inspired you, encouraged you, reinforced the idea that you could dream?
Yeah, she was just special. She's passed on now. She passed on when I was in college, actually. Um, uh, if you're a religious person, you could say that God puts people in your path, and
Mhm.
if you're awake enough to listen to them, they'll make a difference. Um, when I started off in elementary school, Spanish was my first language. I had verbal skills issues. I had attention issues. Like I said, I couldn't sit still. My first grade teacher really couldn't handle that. I had a lot of struggles along the way, and then when I got to second grade, she embraced that. And that one memory, people would say, like, why can you? I'm sure some people would say, why are you going all the way back to second grade? Is because there's that one moment where you're like, I remember when this happened, and I remember saying, like, hey, I can do this, kind of thing, right? And I remember we had taken an exam. It was like an aptitude test that they had given to everyone in second grade, and I had no idea what this was. It was either a statewide or a national wide test. And I took it and I went home, and then she said the next day, she's like, I want to talk to your parents. I was like, oh God, here it comes, right? My father's gonna like knock me down. And sure enough, she has a meeting, and in front of my parents, she basically said, he scored in the top 1%. Like, you should really keep him going because he could do something. And it was that moment where that dread that you have as a child, you're like, man, I'm really in for it. To somebody being like, oh shoot, I've never seen my dad smile so big. Like, he's really proud of me, right? And I think that's probably what kind of gets you going.
Oh, that's a great story. That's a really great story. So you have this experience, you have this moment with this teacher, and would you say that kind of set you up the rest of the way? Was it at that point that even you believed in yourself and that you could, you know, accomplish big things?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a lot of things, not just that, but I think whenever third grade, I had the similar struggles with my teacher that I did in first grade, right? And fourth grade, I started figuring it out a little bit better, and then but every time I encountered a new struggle, I always went back to that little Spanish nun. I was like, hey, she believed in me. Clearly, I did something that made me feel special, that whatever struggles I was having in third or fourth grade um, were not from lack of an ability, right? and
Mhm.
and I think it's a little bit poetic to think of it that way, but I'll be honest, as a third grader, fourth grader, whenever the next teacher kind of would sit me down, give me a good lecture, I'd be like, yeah, I'll listen to you because my dad's gonna have his way with me if I don't, but I know whatever you're saying, I'm gonna figure out a way to do well, kind of thing.
It's it's amazing when when we're forced to look back and we think about those people along the way, right? That and it's something as simple as that. Having her bring in your parents, talk about what the possibilities, right, because of that score, and how profound an effect they can have, right? We look back and it's just amazing to see the power, because I think some people, it's elementary, but man, it feels like it, at least not, your story is certainly unique, but also there's so many similarities with a lot of my other guests that talk about that second grade teacher, third grade teacher, whatever but that teacher, that one teacher that kind of and it's just that one person. I just need that one person to believe in me. And like you said, when you face struggle, when you face those challenges, you can always sort of refer back to that. But that teacher believed in me, right?
Yeah.
It's amazing how powerful that is. You said you were the second in your family behind your sister to go to college, the third on the other side of your family.
Right.
Was So would you say college wasn't necessarily a foregone conclusion for you, or was that something that your parents always instilled in you?
Yeah, I was really lucky. So my not to get into different stories, but my mom's and my aunt's stories are quite unique, and that's better left for a different podcast. But um, they're each other's best friends, and my mom, although she was bright, because of gender issues, because of being an immigrant in this country, certain doors were not open to her, and she's always reminiscing about what might have been. But she made sure her sister didn't have those limitations, and her sister got to go to college and got to go to dental school, and is actually a very successful dentist now. And so literally from the moment I was born, she was like, you have to be like your aunt. Don't be like me. Don't let anything hold you back. So it was pretty much a foregone conclusion that if I didn't go to college, I would have been a disappointment kind of thing in the family.
Yeah,
But in a good way, not in any way a negative way. It was more like
yeah.
when we sat down, they said, when you go to college, this is what you're going to do. It was not like if you go to college, right? So I was very lucky that that level of motivation was always there.
Now, Chewy, you went to Stanford University. Did you you know, looking back on it now, to go to college is one thing. To attend Stanford University is a whole is a whole other thing. When did you realize that Stanford was a possibility, or places like Stanford were a possibility?
It's embarrassing. I didn't even know that Stanford was that good. I didn't, even though
Yeah,
my aunt who ended up, I'm sure she knew that Stanford was very good, right? But
yeah,
she had her own path. And so the conversations as to where I was going to go to college never really came up until it was a choice that I had to make, right? And I'll
mhm,
be honest, and I don't know if I ever shared this with you, but my father didn't want me to go to Stanford. He wanted me to go to a local college because he had never heard of Stanford. And my sister was already going to a local Jesuit university. And so he was like, well, why don't you go with your sister so you can keep an eye on her and she can keep an eye on you? Um, I did have an idea that Stanford was pretty good. I'm not going to lie, when I
yeah,
applied. Um, but just what that meant, I didn't know, right? And
yeah,
so it came down to two or three choices. And, this is where it's better to be lucky than good. Stanford gave me the best financial aid. And when I saw how much I was going to owe, I looked at my dad. I was like, well, you can't say no to Stanford because otherwise I'm going to come out with, triple the debt.
mhm,
And then when he said okay, then he started talking around and asking around, and then people started telling him that Stanford was actually a really good school and I should go there. But in terms of actually thinking that once I figured out that Stanford was very good, how I actually thought I could go there, I'll be honest, I don't know. Yeah,
well,
I just don't.
you've alluded to a couple of things, and you're talked about your mom. You've talked a little bit about your father. You're as a son of immigrants. uh, I've heard countless stories about from my guess that they had to educate their parents, right? So even if mom and dad wanted them to go to college, they kind of educated them and about the process and some of the information and sort of the customs. Did you find yourself, you or your sister, having to do that with your parents? I mean, it's one thing for our kid, like I want my kids to go to college, but as a recent immigrant, right, first generation American, there's not a lot that I might know about college. So did you find that you had to do a lot of that educating for them?
Yeah, yeah, and even though we were going to go to college, I don't know if your family is like this, but my whole family thinks like an engineer is God or priest. You could do nothing wrong by either being a priest or an engineer. And so my father was kind of like, well, you can do that anywhere. Why don't you just do it here? And then we
Mhm.
can keep you close. We can keep an eye on you, and if you're ever in trouble, we can help you out, right? And my father's brothers, who are not as academically um, uh, push as much emphasis on academics as my mother's side, right? They criticized my father. They're like, why is he coming out with so much debt? This is stupid. He could do this anywhere. He can go to a local school. None of my kids I didn't go to college and I'm fine, right? That's that kind of mentality where you grow up in, a small hick town in Mexico where no one ever leaves, or you take on your father's profession and everyone looks up to the priest or everyone looks up to the engineer, which is why everyone's got to try to be one or the other, right?
Yeah.
And I don't fault them for it. I think that's just when you don't know any better, that's you just see all the negatives and taking a risk. And a lot of the problem that I encountered was people didn't want me to take certain risks. They because they're risks that they wouldn't want to take, right?
Yeah.
It's hard.
Um, yeah, that's really powerful. How, and I don't know that you can answer this. Um, because those ideas, those beliefs tend to be pretty powerful. They tend to have a really strong hold on folks. But your father obviously believed in you and wanted better for you. Did he ever, did the two of you ever have a conversation about why he chose this for you versus what his brothers maybe were doing?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we're lucky that we went to Stanford, right?
Mhm.
A lot of bright people didn't get in, and a
Mhm.
lot of people who probably deserved it more than me didn't get in, and I'm not ashamed to say that. We all know the story where, like, for every one of us that got accepted, three people got turned down who had the same grades and had the same story, right? Um, but the great thing that Stanford does is in my experience, a lot of these really elite colleges do a good job of telling parents everything's going to be okay, telling them and educating them on what it means, right? And my father to this day remembers the acceptance dinner that they had in the Los Angeles Bonaventure, where they sat him down and they said, "Look, some of you might be thinking of telling your kids to go somewhere else, but when your kid comes here, he will never have a problem finding a job." And that opened my father's eyes, and then he started asking questions and he started looking, saying, "Oh, wow." And then he asked his coworkers and they're like, "Oh, Stanford is." And then once they started explaining to him that Stanford was a great school, then he understood. And then, you know after I started and after my father started understanding all this, then he kind of, in his own unique Latino way, explaining that, "Hey, I'm proud of you,
Yeah.
and you got to keep going," right? Not that it was always, roses, but even though my father likes to act like he's a strong, man who'll never do anything, every once in a while there's a tear in his eye and he says, "Hey, come back, we miss you," but he won't exactly say it that way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, you go to Stanford. What was that transition like for you? Coming from the LA area, and I know a little bit about your high school, just from what you shared with me in the past. But was that transition a difficult transition, high school to Stanford?
Yeah, yeah. I think you and I grew up in similar communities. I'd say my high school was 80% Spanish speaking, maybe even Spanish speaking as a first language. The other of the other 20%, I'd say 15% were another minority, whether it be an Asian or African American minority. So only about 5% was not, self-identified as a minority community. So going to Stanford, where the numbers flip back to what the average American numbers are, and even then probably drastically worse, because this is a higher academic institution where the numbers are skewed, not on purpose, but just based on admissions qualifications.
Yeah.
It's a rude awakening. You're out of your comfort level, right? I remember looking around my biology class and maybe only seeing one or two people that I recognized, who I know I could speak to them in Spanish. The rest of them, I'm like, oh wow, this is there's not a lot of us to go out and get some tamales to study, right? Like it's a rude awakening. It's hard.
Yeah. I when we met, you were a sophomore. You were a junior. I think you were a junior. I was a sophomore. And like I said at the beginning, I was really impressed with your work ethic. And I remember, and I know, your roommate Carlos. I remember I used to tease him because
I love that guy.
he'd like set his alarm, and we'd be at the dining hall, and his alarm would go off at these random times, and he'd just get up and like, I've got to go study. And like dude, you just sat down. But I was always just so impressed with the two of you, your work ethic. Was that something you developed there at Stanford? Was it something that you developed earlier in high school, or did you always have that work ethic?
I'll be honest. I think I got it there. So speaking about the people in your path, my best friend in high school, this great Italian kid, his name was Tony Avicoli. Hardest working guy I've ever met in my life. We were in the same baseball team my sophomore year at high school. And then junior year in high school, we started hanging out. And I remember we were in the similar math and science courses. And I was getting really good grades by that time, and he was too. And I remember I'd go to his house, and then the next day, I still remember this. We took a test, and I got the second highest score, and he beat me. And I was like, I know the question I got wrong, and I had never seen that question before. And I was like, how did you get it right? He's like, well, the day before test, I stay up and I do every problem in the book for the 4 chapters that the test is going to be on, and I do it 3 times because I know she's going to use those for the test. And I was like, well, what time are you going to bed at? He's like, well, sometimes at 1, sometimes 2 in the morning. And I said, man, I love this guy to death, but if I got to beat him, I got to work harder than him, right?
Yeah.
And it was that reality, and he taught me that. He taught me that no one knows everything, but if you're able to outwork someone, it's really hard for them to beat you, right? And that's true in everything, right? In sports, life, work, marriage. If you're able to outwork, you can find a way to succeed. And so I remember walking into Stanford and seeing the rude awakening that I had, and I said, okay, I'm not going to let these guys outwork me. And so, I score a good grade, but not as good as I'd want, and that would just mean I have to stay up a little bit later the next day.
Wow. Yeah. You in your introduction, right? You told us about your profession. And when I started the podcast largely because I was teaching first year college students. Been doing that now this is year 21 for me doing this. But what I've noticed was that over the last 5-6 years, more and more of my students were coming in with incredible amount of anxiety around the idea that I've got to figure out my life now. I've got to be 18 and know what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. And it was really concerning because just in my experience and in the among the amazing, incredible people that I'd met, very few of them kind of knew or were very comfortable kind of adjusting and going down a path, and rarely was it a straight line. I know when I met you, you wanted to go to medical school. and I remember you Saturday mornings. I think you would go and volunteer, right, at the local clinic or something like that, right? Um, when did you know? When did you know I'm going to be a doctor? I'm not going to be a priest or an engineer, but I'm going to be a doctor. When did you know?
You know, I think I just gradually accepted the fact that it's okay to dream to be a doctor. I think I always wanted to do something along the lines of healthcare, right? I loved service. I loved volunteering. I loved helping people. But medicine was always a pipe dream. It was like that's for people who are the sons of rich kids. That's for people who have all these opportunities. And so I just always worked hard. I just worked hard, and then eventually I allowed myself to believe that okay, I can be a doctor. And that reality didn't really happen until my junior year of Stanford. You know, everyone always says, you know, well, you were the brightest kid in junior high, but high school is different. Oh, you were the brightest kid in high school, but college is different. And everyone's always trying to knock you down, and not on purpose, but they're trying to help manage expectations, right? Mm-hmm. Which I appreciate. But then when you finally comes time to say, okay, am I an idiot for dreaming this? And that probably didn't happen until I met you, until like junior year, where, you know, I looked at my resume and I said, you know, they would be an idiot to say no to me. I'm a good candidate. And I think at that moment, probably around, I think it was after I got my MCAT score, which was summer after my junior year, when I saw that, you know, I am right along the kind of people who get accepted to the places I want to go to. I said, okay, I think I want to be a doctor because I know I can do it. But there's always a backup plan. You're always like, well, if that doesn't work, I can do this, I can do that, but I'm going to keep trying, right? It's that kind of thing.
What was your backup plan?
Math, I think. I really enjoyed math. You know, the backup plans were more like, hey, I kind of liked my poli-sci class, but I'm not a very good reader, but I could figure out a way to do it. Oh, I really like my math class. I really like my physics class. You know, it was one of my favorites. But they were all more like, you know, it's going to take me a few years to develop this backup plan if the primary plan doesn't work, I guess.
Well, yeah, I'm glad your primary plan worked out for you.
It's scary, right?
Yeah. You talked about your MCAT score. You talked about, you know, being on path and having the scores to go places where you'd like to go. Where did you end up going to medical school?
I went to Harvard Medical School, which great place. I definitely love that place.
Yeah. So let me ask you. You know, you said your father and even you didn't know a whole lot about Stanford. Was that the case with Harvard?
No, it was total opposite. It was. I to this day I laugh at that because he had never heard of any of the colleges I applied to, but he had heard of Harvard. And I guess, and you know, this podunk little town in Mexico, even they've heard of Harvard, right? And I remember I was trying to decide between Harvard and another hospital, a medical school, because they're both really good. And he had never heard of the other one, of course. And he's like, well, you got to go to Harvard. I mean, come on, you can't not go to Harvard. Said, all right, Dad. I'm probably going to go there, but just to let you know, I still haven't decided,
right? As is the case, I think, with most people, and feel free to correct me, when you go to medical school, some people have an idea of what they want to specialize in. Some, when they get there, they develop that idea. Did you know? Did you go in knowing, like, you know, I want to be a cardiologist, or I want to? No.
No. Going back to like my background, I really, my dream, and I'm sure I talked to you about this when we were in college. I always wanted to do international health. To this day, the people I admire the most do that, right? I don't know if your listeners or you heard, you know, what my hero, his name was Dr. Paul Farmer, just passed away earlier this year. And the guy's a legend. And those were my role models. And that's a great thing about a lot of these really great universities. They have people who are living legends and heroes, right? This guy came from, you know, he's a Caucasian male, grew up in a trailer park, from I believe a single mom, and he works his way, works hard, gets all the way through Harvard Medical School, and could have been a millionaire, and he decided to save the world. And so he he got in trouble in the medical school because he was, you know, stealing medications from the hospital and taking them to Peru, to give it to them for free because they didn't have it. And the guy's just a legend, and I wanted to be him. And so he graciously, you know, took me on and took me to Peru with him, and with many other people as well. I obviously wasn't the only one. And all these guys who ended up sticking around with him became my heroes, who are still working, doing the job, right? They're still doing that. But, you know, like any other career, med school is hard. And when you're sleep deprived, hungry, lonely, you realize quickly what you see yourself doing and not doing. And cardiology was the one thing that I enjoyed staying up to read about and getting better at. And some things I didn't. Some things I was like, okay, you know, I'd rather get an extra 30 minutes of sleep, or I'd rather go to the cafeteria and get that, you know, really old grilled cheese sandwich, because I think that is more important to me than learning about this particular subject. Whereas for some reason, cardiology wasn't that for me. And so I just figured that's probably where I should go.
Wow. After you settle on cardiology, and after Harvard, what was next?
Yeah, so it's a long haul. So I met my wife when I was in my last 2 years at Harvard. And so we started a long distance relationship. I then stayed in Boston for another 3 years to do my residency, which was hard because she's from LA. And so she graciously agreed to move out to be closer to me when I finished residency. But I was it no, while I was in residency, she moved out there to do Teach for America. In not exactly Boston, it was Connecticut, but at least she was closer. And then we decided to go to New York so I could finish my training there. And then when I finished my training at Columbia University, we already had our first son. And so at that time, we all kind of decided that, you know, family is probably the bigger priority now. And so once I finished my training, I came back to Los Angeles to kind of set up practice here.
What advice do you have, Chewy, for folks who feel like, you know, because I mean, you sound incredibly blessed, you know, obviously have this incredible education, but I think, and knowing you, I always got the sense that family was important. What advice do you have for somebody who has incredible aspirations, big dreams, but also wants a family? You know, how were you able to manage that while, you know, like you said, you had your son and finishing up medical school or your residency and specialization? What advice would you have somebody who wants to dream big, but also wants to have a family?
Yeah, you can make it work, but it's not like the movies. You know, you'd like it to be like the movies where you know you right off into the sunset with everything, but you have to make sacrifices, and that's the hard part, right? You know, there's different very famous people within my profession who have horrible family lives, and it's not their fault. It's just the job demands it. And at a certain point, you have to decide, well, what sacrifices am I willing to make, and which ones am I not? You could be a very famous professor and have a good family life, but you may not be able to do other things. You may not be able to travel. You may not be able to own the home that you want. You may not even be able to, you know, provide your kids with a trust fund, but you'll be able to have the professorship and the family life, right? And or you may want the trust fund and the professional life, but then you can't have the family life, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you can. I just did that as an example. Having an understanding partner goes a long way. Having someone who understands the rigors of whatever your dream or your passion is go a very long way. And sometimes there's a lot of rough roads along the way, but if you guys value each other's dreams, you'll make it work for each other. But no, yeah, you can actually have it all, but you have to be careful what all that means, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, my professors are all legends. They're amazing, and some of them have good family lives and some don't. I mean, Paul Farmer himself, it was away for like 6 months out of the year in Russia, in Peru, and Haiti. So it's hard to like help your kid with your homework when you're on a different time zone, right?
Yeah.
Whereas other people are not. You know, his partner, you know, Jim Kim was another hero, decided to stay a little bit more settled, and he became the head of the World Bank, and he had a stable home life. I don't know what his home life is because I didn't interact with him as much. Um, but there are plenty of people who make it work. You just have to be willing to make certain sacrifices.
Chewy, I think you did a thorough job of answering that. I'm trying to come up with. No, I think well, thank you for your story. Thank you for everything that you've shared. I I always ask my guests as we close out, final words, any pieces of advice for young people who are trying to find their way. I would say any advice for those 18, 19-year-olds who think they've got to have it all figured out.
Yeah, no, you don't. You definitely don't have to figure it out. And mental health is the most important health there is. If you're constantly stressing out and constantly worrying about failure, you're gonna fail. You just can't. And you may be a success in many things, but if you can't take time to take a deep breath and say this is what matters, then it will end up catching up to you. We've all had those moments. There's this great TV. I love this TV show. Oh God, what is it called? It's This Is Life or This Is It or something like that. Where the adopted son ends up having a panic attack and is crouched in the corner, and his stepbrother has to come and save him, right, from himself. That could be you, and we've all had close moments to that, right, where you just put way too much on yourself. And being a child of immigrants, we get it hard too, right? Where you look back and you're like, oh my God, look at where I've come. I can't fail now, otherwise it's all on me. And that's not fair to you, and that's not fair to anybody. I think every parent, and I know this now as a dad, right? I have 3 wonderful kids. They're amazing. And you're always like, oh, I have to get them into Harvard, right? And then you take a step back and you're like, that's not happiness. My kid having a stable relationship, joy every morning he wakes up, that's success for me. And that's what I want for my son. And my daughter, of course. What I want more, sure, but no good parent would want more than that for their children. They would want them to be happy. And I know it's a cliche, but it's a complete reality. Anyone who has a child knows that deep down inside, their child could be a street mine, but if they're happy, and they wake up every morning knowing that it's another beautiful day and they're happy to be alive, that's the biggest victory. And then along those lines, if you put in the work, success will take care of itself, right? I have many friends and that I've met along the way. I have many co-workers and employees, and the ones who work hard, they're going to do well, no matter what. Even the ones who struggled in high school, and this, and those who struggled in any one way, if they're willing to put in the work, happiness will find them. And for me, it was medicine. For my wife, it was education. She's a teacher. For my sister, it's law. But Some of us take a little bit longer to figure out what that passion is. My sister didn't figure it out till much later than I did, and she struggled a long time, but now she's an insane success. So if you're willing to stick it through and just not give up on your passion, you'll get there. In Spanish, we say ganas, right? But in English, you say put in the work, and you'll get there. But don't put that pressure on yourself. It's just not worth it.
Yeah. Great advice. Great advice, man. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Chuy, thank you again. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your story. I think there's my listeners will really appreciate it. And I think there's a lot that they'll be able to connect to and will help them along their own journey. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. And again, thank you for doing this. This is awesome.
This concludes another episode, the Way to College podcast. Make sure you join us next time. Don't forget to follow, rate, subscribe, all of that good stuff. And we'll see you again. Bye-bye.